the line you always hear is, your husband or your partner or whatever should be your best friend. And then that has a weight that's carried with it, right? If you are leaning so much on your partner to be your best friend, does that affect your intimacy?
Yeah, because you're going to be disappointed if they have to be your best friend at the same level that your best friend is. So it's almost like saying, what are the essential things I need in somebody? And then give them a little grace and latitude in the things that are not as important. Nobody does it all at Olympic class. And the important thing is to find out where you can get what you need and not overload one system. What I would say, my analogy of that is if I have a table that is a pedestal, it only has one leg. And if that pedestal leg goes, the whole table is no longer a table. But if I have a table with 7 or 8 legs and 1 or 2 is shaky, it's okay. So the 7 or 8 legs might be, in this analogy, my work, my children, my religious community, my hobbies, my volunteer work. I mean, those might all be really important legs in the table. If you have them all, then you don't put so much stress on just one leg to support the whole deal.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Better Together. When you know better, you get better. Welcome to a mischievous episode of this show.
So mischievous.
I am your host, Maria Menounos. Woo! This music is everything. It makes me so happy. Our quote of the day: we come to love not by finding a perfect person, but by learning to see an imperfect person perfectly. Sam Keen, to love and be loved. Why do I want an imperfect person?
Yeah, I want a perfect person.
I don't want some scum and then I find them to be perfect because they're imperfect.
Do you guys know any perfect people?
Yes. Hello.
I mean, besides you, Maria.
Everyone on screen right now.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure.
Everybody here.
We're the ones.
We're like so perfect. So perfect.
Ryan's voice.
It's perfect.
Guys, you don't know how perfect. Funny enough, we have acclaimed author, researcher, television personality, Dr. Pepper Schwartz is going to be on. You might know her as the expert on Married at First Sight. Jeff, I thought she was a doctor.
She's a doctor. Did I hope I wrote that.
No, you didn't. I just had to add it in there. And I was like, well, now I'm very nervous.
She certainly does. She received her PhD in psychology from Yale, so she's definitely a doctor.
Okay,
yes.
So maybe just say Dr. Pepper Schwartz.
Yes, I should definitely have that in there.
So anyway, Dr. Pepper Schwartz. Oh, she's over here. She's written over here. Dr. Pepper Schwartz is going to be on. We're going to talk about relationships. Let's chat with Dr. Pepper Schwartz. As I said, she's an author, researcher, TV personality. Of course, you guys probably know her from Married at First Sight. She's devoted her life to furthering the fields of intimacy and sexuality. She's received her PhD in sociology at Yale University. She's written over 25 books on the subjects of love, sexuality, and commitment. Right now, she's going to help us unpack how to maintain good relationships. Dr. Schwartz, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
You talk a lot about quality time with your partner. I feel like we've gotten a lot of quality time with our partners. And for some people, that's not a good thing. My husband and I have been scotch taped to each other for 21 years anyway. So this has been no different for us. But for other people, is it good that they have this much time? Is it something that inevitably they would have seen down the road? That, if they're having problems now, that they would have happened inevitably? Or is this something that just exacerbates it and you should get through it?
Oh, I don't think you can underestimate how strange this is. Because remember, even if you've been scotch taped to somebody, you had friends, you had family, you had children or adult children, you had other things to do. You had things that created space because, it's a full life. In this case, all of those things have been taken away from people. No friends, no family, and an overwhelming sense of dread and pressure. I mean, all of this is very unusual. So I think, yeah, if you'd gone through the Depression together, if you'd gone through World War II together, I mean, there's other exogenous things that really affect people. But this is extremely unusual. And I think it'd be important for people not to forget that, because they think, well, maybe these were all cracks in the house we built together anyhow. But no, I don't think so. Those things happen in intensity like this very rarely. So I think people have to give each other a break and get through it. On the other hand, I think it's really important to create space when you have none, which is to say, okay, I'm going to go read now, or, I'm going to take a walk by myself, or I'm going to train the dog and I'm going to do it over there. But whatever it is, we weren't meant to be tied together. We evolved as a species that had to do a lot of things in a day just to get food, just to avoid enemies. So we're cloistered in a very unusual way, and I think people need to know that they need to use their resources to give each other back some privacy. But this isn't like they would have had this down the road.
Yeah, I think I need to unscotch my tape sometimes too.
I think everybody does.
Yeah. I think it's funny, when my husband goes away, I do find so much joy in just being alone and like getting on my couch and reading a book and, but I won't do that naturally, when he's here. It's odd. I don't know why.
Well, I think there's this pressure to be a couple and be coupled and not to need to take time away. But I think that's something that's from a different generation. The idea that the woman is just always there to service her guy's needs. What can I do for you lately? If you like me to be co-present, I'm going to be co-present. But that's something that we can unpack now, because we're not the same as our mothers and grandmothers were. We have a different psychological inner life, for that matter. I don't think our grandparents felt entitled to have that. I think a lot of men felt that if they had an inner life, it was weak, to think about, doubting themselves, or is this who I should be, or what I'm doing, etc. So I think the new kind of mantra for psychologists is differentiation, that you have to be your own person as well as part of a couple. And being one's own couple means being one's own person means carving out the time to be that person, to have, to see movies that your partner doesn't like, or to get a hobby that's yours and yours alone, or to have a journal in which you express yourself that person has no right to see. We are our own person, and we're stronger together if we're stronger individually.
Ooh, I like that. Stronger together if we're stronger individually. I like that. You talk about assuming that romantic relationships are supposed to meet all of our needs, and you talk about how dangerous that line of thinking is. Can you explain that more?
Oh my goodness, just think of that. Just put that on that mantle on your shoulders. I have to do everything my partner needs in all categories at all times. It's just suffocating. I mean, we can't do that. And we also, if we expect, for example, our partner, unless your partner's a psychologist or a therapist or whatever, they're probably not skilled in telling you the things you need to hear all the time, or being your best confidant. If your best confidant is your girlfriend, if you're a woman, or if you're a guy, you like having parallel games with a male friend, you don't really want to unload your spirit all the time. That's okay. You don't have to have, your partner, your sexual and romantic partner specialize also in being your best friend who understands you better than anyone else in the world. Chances are it's not your husband or spouse or significant other. It's probably either your mother or your sister or, your best friend. And if you look at your husband and say he's not doing his share because he's not as good as they are, that's just a recipe for disaster. We can't be everything at an Olympic level. We can do the core things that make us happy to be together. And then we have to offload and delegate other things and say, it's okay, I don't need to get them from you. Because if you do ask that, we will all be found wanting in some way.
Whoa. Okay, hold on. I want to unpack this a little bit, because
Go ahead.
The line you always hear is, your husband or your partner or whatever should be your best friend. And then that has a weight that's carried with it, right? So if it's your best friend, then they should be listening to you and should have, helpful advice for you and all of that. So where does that line get drawn? And then if you are leaning so much on your partner to be your best friend, does that affect your intimacy?
Yeah, because you're going to be disappointed if they have to be your best friend at the same level that your best friend is. I mean, there are some relationships that are like that. Most men, many men think their wife is their best friend. Way fewer women think their husband is their best friend, because women have developed, real skills by having close girlfriends all their lives, even in play as little kids, where they understand, how to say about their fears, their deepest thoughts. Their other friend is keeping a running tab on how they're doing. Men often believe in, just be there for me. It feels good to have you around, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to talk about their deepest fears, their confessions, their childhood. It's a rare man who does that. And usually they're gay. And that's why women love gay men, because they are, in fact, soulmates in some ways that straight men really rarely develop until maybe 50, 60 years old. They do change. But the fact is, if you say, I want a man, let's say, as we're talking as women here, who has my back, you can have that. That's a really important thing. Your best friend might not always be there to have your back, but your partner, that's delegated to them, which is, if I'm sick, if I'm worried, if I'm in trouble, we need to survive in this world, if we're planning a future, having your back is there. But your best friend is not delegated for that. They've got their own world they have to solve as well. So it's almost like saying, what are the essential things I need in somebody? And then give them a little grace and latitude in the things that are not as important. And some of them might be, maybe your partner is the warmest, sweetest, most understanding, psychologically complex person in the world. But maybe they're not so good at some other male role that you might have expected them to have. Nobody does it all at Olympic class. And the important thing is to find out where you can get what you need and not overload one system. What I would say, my analogy of that is, if I have a table that is a pedestal and only has one leg, and if that pedestal leg goes, the whole table is no longer a table. But if I have a table with 7 or 8 legs, and 1 or 2 is shaky, it's okay. So the 7 or 8 legs might be, in this analogy, my work, my children, my religious community, my hobbies, my volunteer work. I mean, those might all be really important legs in the table. If you have them all, then you don't put so much stress on just one leg to support the whole deal.
Wow. Do you guys have any follow-ups on that one?
I think it's really valuable. I think it's heartening to hear a relationship expert acknowledge that relationships can't be our everything. I think so often we think relationship experts, their job is to tell us that this is the only thing that'll make us happy. This is our sole source of satisfaction. So it's very enlightening and kind of refreshing, Dr. Schwartz, to hear you say that's not the case.
Well, I'm glad you think so, because I think it's really essential, particularly in today's world. We've started to ask more and more of our spouse, that they should be our best friend, that they should be psychologically sensitive, that they should be really great at creating romance, etc., when we have less and less time for any of this to happen. At the same time, we're asking more of our spouse. We have technology invading our life, making it better in so many ways, but we're supposed to be on the ready every single second on our cell phone. I mean, if somebody doesn't get me, for a couple hours on my cell phone, they think I'm dead.
Yep.
It's kind of like that. I mean, it used to be that faxes were, well, now it's instantaneously. We have, because even in this sequestration, even in quarantine, the technology reaches in and also helps us reach out. But we find ourselves increasingly learning about Zoom, learning about these things, and suddenly we're really busy. We have a lot of requests if you have little time. If you have little kids, oh my goodness, because now you're taking them to 42 different kinds of sports, et cetera, when it used to be maybe baseball in the summer and something else in the winter. And I don't think we realize how complex our lives have gotten compared to previous generations. So, the thought is, you build up everything else and you ask more from this relationship. It's too much.
Yeah, it really is, actually. It's really interesting. I've never heard anybody say that. That's why I'm really like taking a second to digest it, because I feel like, in this world, you're hearing, "You're my everything," repeatedly. "You're my best friend," and there's, like I said, there's a weight to those words. And I think it sets an example for people, for something to strive for, right? Like, my husband does happen to be somebody who is very connected to his feminine side, and he listens, and he's right there with you trying to solve issues, like, and I am the same with him, but that's not always the case, right? And it does burden us for sure, because you have to listen to everything. That's a lot.
Well, and sometimes you have to say, well, not today, not right now. And it's not about you. It's about me. It's about what I need, what kind of space I need, what kind of contemplation time I need. I mean, I think what's really important is to create an embrace in a relationship of, I'm here for you. I do have your back. I love you. And now we can make it any other way we like. Mm-hmm. All you have to know is that. And then the sense is I have an unusual relationship with my husband. And that is that although we've been together 15 years, we've both been married before. And like a lot of people who got married later in life, we had, whole commitments in terms of where we lived, to communities, et cetera, right? So instead of battling it out because he likes being on the water and I like being in the mountains, we don't live together. No.
What?
And we go back and forth to each other's house. He was just here for 4 days. I'm going to go over there tonight, I think. And I think we both really like it. It's not the way I was in my other marriage. I had a marriage of 23 years. But this is right for this time of life. And the idea being, why can't you innovate? Why can't you figure it out for you? It's nobody else's marriage but yours. The question is, are you happy in it? Do you both living the life you want? Do you communicate about if there's any changes in what you're getting or not? And are there some losses in any choice? Yes. Are there some gains in most choices? You hope so.
Wait, I have to ask, how far away do you live from each other?
About an hour.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay, so there are no rules. And that's another thing is I feel like we put so much pressure on ourselves with so many rules of what it's supposed to be like that, again, it's refreshing to hear that you made it work for both of you to be happy as individuals, like you said, so that you can be happy together.
Exactly. And that's the trick of it. And that's the creativity of it. And it's also true over a life cycle, because what might have been just perfect, we couldn't do it this way if we were raising little children together.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't work. There are exterior boundaries that are real and true in life. And, you have to accept that and work with it. But when those boundaries change, or when your life changes over time, the question is, who are we now? What do we want now? How do we get creative and still be true to each of us, as well as to this union that we pledge to support and love for our life? It's a very, I think, profound thing to get married, to make a commitment to someone, however you phrase it. And that means that you're making a commitment to that individual as well as to the collective good. And all of that has to be in the mix. Is each individual having the happiest life they can, while, being committed to the inevitable compromises that, creating a whole requires, but that doesn't mean that you can't be creative and do it your own way. I think where people get in trouble is they get some fixed idea in their head and they feel like it's unquestionable, but everything is worth reviewing and thinking out and seeing if that's the place you want to be at this point in your life, even though it was perfectly good at some other time.
Wow. What, Dr. Schwartz, what are you, obviously you've studied love and it's been your life's work. When you look at the younger generation, what do you see good and bad? And how would you advise them to navigate in this world, obviously with social media and, millennial
Well, I see a lot of good, and I see some things that I think people will have to work with over their lifetime. The good is I find a lot of the very young people, I have kids that are in their 30s, as I very, very much concerned with the care of the planet, much more environmentalist, I think, than my generation was growing up. I mean, I don't think we ever thought about where anything came from. But now these kids do. They have social conscience. I'm very excited about a lot of the social movements where people are trying to think of how are people treated in the world and what's my responsibility in that. On the other hand, this has been an unlucky generation in the sense that they've had two really difficult economic situations. First, 2008 to 2011, there were no jobs. Everybody was taking these free internships just to get their foot in the door of maybe a job at some point. So a lot of people did a lot of sort of more service type jobs and temporary things. And I think they learned a lot about the wage economy there. And I think that gave them a sensibility and a fear too. I mean, it's not all good about, how vulnerable economically they are. And bam, now some years later, they've hit the COVID-19 retraction of the economy. So I feel for these young people, I grew up in a situation we didn't have to worry about that. It was an expanding economy. That is not what people have had since really the early 80s on. So I have empathy for them. Do I think there's some problems? Yes. I think they have become way too dependent on technology. I mean, there's a kind of phone and music and on the technology kind of addiction is all I can say, where, I see everybody, I travel a lot, or used to, I assume I will again after all this. And I see no one talking, everybody wrapped in these little devices, not reaching out to each other. And a sense of anomie and loneliness, I think, actually comes over people because, not being in a community, I think, is a cost. I do see some movements sometimes now that we can work at home more out of the big cities, sometimes into smaller communities. But I feel that we still haven't figured out how to use, particularly the young people, how to use technology in a way that doesn't isolate them rather than connect them.
What about in terms of online dating?
I think online dating is a great advance. It gets you out of your network. I mean, it used to be, it was who you knew, who lived next to you, who somebody you knew, or the bars. And I think the technology of online dating is a major advantage. Now, if you get into just swiping left or right, I think that makes you feel like everybody's fungible. It's a bad place to get to. But what I've seen is most people sort of graduate out of that. They're tired of lots of bodies. They just want one body. And then they start being much more serious about it.
Interesting. I feel like, I have to ask a question. I have a friend who's going through another breakup with the same person. And how do you advise someone who's breaking up with somebody that they feel is their soulmate? They feel is the one, and they keep trying to hang in and they keep trying to make it work. And repeatedly, this person breaks their heart. How would you advise that person in that situation?
Because it's like, how do you drink? How do you advise someone who's an alcoholic? When they go to the next, they're going to open a bottle of wine and you say, I love you. You drink too much. Let's not open that bottle. I can handle it, or whatever. It's just, they're addicted. And love is addicting. And I think people, this is I wish this wasn't the most common story I've ever heard, but it really is. That person gives them just enough to hope for better. Then somebody pulls away because they're trying to save themselves. And then somehow there was something that they were both getting out of it, that one person opens the door a little bit and the other person rushes in and they have a great moment together. And then the same cycle goes on. And unfortunately, it kind of goes on until something so crashes and burns that they have to realize that there's absolutely no hope. So as a good friend, you have to say, we have seen this cycle before. It's not going to be better. You are who you are. He is or she is who she is. And they're going to say, you're right, and go back and do exactly what they're going to do. So as a good friend, I guess you can only say, here's what I think. Here's why I think it. And I'm here for you when this ends again. And I have been that person, I think I've been in when I was younger on one side of it. Now I'm on the person who sees it in others and tries to get them out of it and extract them from something that's really hurting them. And all you can do is be a good friend. I've certainly lost friends for a time because you tell somebody that they really don't want to hear, what they'll do if they're not going to change is they'll avoid you. Because you're the bad news that's telling them what they don't want to hear, right? They come back after the 14th burn or whatever it is and say, you were right, but it's a tough one because I think there's a love addiction every bit as powerful as heroin and other horrible drugs. It's, you're in a cycle of endocrine attachment where you're getting when you get the reinforcement, you're flooded with androgens and it's just a high, and then there's the low. People get into that.
Yeah. Is there any way, if you are finding your love addicted, to snap yourself out of it? Is the only way meeting somebody new?
It helps a lot.
Yeah.
But of course, you're so addicted, you don't either put the energy into seeing somebody new, or you always find why they're not as good as, the person you've loved. It's therapy is a good one. It does help. At least it gives you somebody that that you can't pass off as some other agenda, right? To go and find out just why you are so into this person. What is it? Are you trying to solve some father deprivation? I mean, this sounds so raw, but often it is. It's that let's say you had a rejecting, powerful, successful father who never really was there for you. And that is often a background where somebody likes the conquering the unconquerable, because that way they're also doing that in a sense of repairing the father-daughter thing, which of course they can't do, but they don't understand that the same emotional mechanism is going on with this person who's not giving to you, and you're still trying to make it work. What I say to people, if it's a Pomeranian, you cannot make it into a Doberman, and vice versa, but people will try. Now, sometimes 25 years later, people change. Age does have an impact on people. What do you want those 25 years to look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are real. And they say, well, we had tough times, but we came back together. How long did it take to do that? What was it that you missed and suffered during that period? My feeling to people is you deserve to be happy. If this is not making you happy most of the time, if it's only making you happy occasionally in moments of, sort of wonderful feeling, look at the ratio of happiness to unhappiness and look at the future. I just heard the story of this woman who, sort of hung on with this married man for a zillion years. And when she finally said goodbye, he said, okay, and found someone else to play with. People imagine they're this great romance. Well, that's love addiction. Sometimes it is a great romance, but mostly it's great because it's a romance and not a relationship.
Yeah. And that's such incredible advice, again, is to look at the ratio of happiness to, unhappiness or just lack of happiness, right? You don't have to be sad or upset, but, you can also be in limbo, really taking stock of, are you really having the level of happiness you want every day with this person? And are they hurting you more than they're making you happy? I mean, there's so many things in there that you can do. I love that. Stephen, I know you have a question for Dr. Schwartz. Go for it.
I'm curious what your thoughts on commitment issues and the fear of finding something better are. Because especially in Los Angeles, I feel that a lot of people have this concept of relationships don't work because you're surrounded by options at all times, and how to get out of the mindset that I don't want to settle with this because there's something better that could be on the horizon. Do you have any advice for people to get over that mindset and maybe just realize the good thing they have? Or do you think that mindset's kind of an indicator that you're not ready for something?
I think it's the latter. I think it's a form of narcissism. I mean, you always sort of like, well, what makes you so special, right? I'm aiming for something better. Yeah. Well, why would somebody better want you? And they have to think that they're, so great that of course everybody would want them. And if they're feeling that way, if that's the way somebody looks at themselves, then you don't want that person, because they've obviously got a tip sense of their own importance and market value. A lot of times these, masters of the universe, or these really, beautiful women who have lots of choices, they get to a point where their choices winnow out, because if they're going on, certain kinds of values, let's say good looking, being really good looking, that probably for most people doesn't stay at the same level of attractiveness. But also, even if they're a captain of the universe, she's very successful, he's very successful, that sometimes doesn't go forever. The question is, what is it that makes somebody a worthy partner? And if it's those two things about how extraordinarily successful they are in the marketplace or how gorgeous they are, then if that's what's keeping you in keep looking, then no, you're not ready to settle down with somebody and create something special there. And you should just broadcast that and tell people. The problem is that a lot of these people who are narcissists will do anything they can to make you love them, and then you do. But then once they've done that, they're still looking and or still open. I think you really need to ask yourself if you can't pick well enough to find somebody who satisfies, what you think you can build together for a future, then, look to yourself as opposed to what else is out there about, do you pick badly? Do you pick on the wrong elements? I sometimes tell people when they're out dating, because dating can be a lot of fun. I mean, you experience a lot of different worlds that way, et cetera. If you're really having a lot of fun at it, well, then fine. Just don't telegraph that that's not what you're doing, And I also tell people when they're dating, if someone says they're really not into being committed or settling down, believe them as opposed to see, oh, well, they just haven't met the right person. No,
Yep.
Believe them. So, they're telling you.
Yeah, I'm always surprised why people think that they can change people. Like if someone's honest with you up front, believe them, like you said. Dr. Schwartz, before I let you go, we have to talk about Married at First Sight.
Oh, sure.
Tell me what your experience has been with it. It's for us, like we're fans of the show, and I think it's always great to get to see the success that you guys have with couples. What has this experience been like for you?
Oh, it's been amazing. I've learned so much. I mean, really. Because one of the things we have in Married at First Sight that nobody has as a researcher or clinician is we get information on them pretty much 24/7 every day of the week. And while, we don't fill them after they turn out the lights in bed, we're not that kind of show. They do talk to us. We get a printout of everything they did that day. So we know what their days are like. We can go in there and help them out. Under pressure, people relive or exhibit a lot of things that they wouldn't, just in the office. We're not getting one-spot conversations with people. So it's been illuminating to me. I'm actually thinking now about writing a book about what I've learned, but some of it's bad. I've learned how well people lie. I wish I didn't know that, but, and I mean, how well, because, we always think we're going to pick up lies. Well, there's people who lie badly, but there are also people who lie so well that you really have to discover quite a bit to know that it's something true or not. And in particular, if they lie to themselves, so that, they're not aware of it, but they are. So that one's hard. I've also been shocked watching it, what people will say to each other, that so many people just have no boundaries of the kind of, for lack of a better phrase, aiming at the groin kind of conversations that are very hard to come back from. As I tell people, look, at all of us can remember certain conversations from our childhood, much less last week, that really hurt us. They don't go away. Words matter. Please, if you're angry, step out of the room, or figure out what you can say that is not something that the person will never forget, things like that. On the other hand, I found that people, once they develop trust, they could love a wide variety of people. What they would need is to find someone with those essential elements that they've been looking for. And there's quite a few people out there. And if they get one of those, they're going to be happy. They're going to trust. They're going to build a foundation. They're going to feel love. If there's ever anything that has taught me that there's not only the one, but they're the ones of a certain type. I think, I've learned that through this experiment.
I believe that too. I think that that's a whole other show at some point I'd love to explore a little bit more on is, the fact that it's elements kind of coming together and saying, this is what I want to build a relationship on, right? Here are the foundational elements that I want, and this person has them. So many people are just stuck on a soulmate. Again, there's so many fairy tales, I feel like, around relationships.
There are. Well, and we come by them honestly. Look at all the Disney films about the prince and the princess. Oh my gosh, we still dressing little girls as princesses, etc. And, we all love romance, and we're just fed a lot of it. And it can't help but sink in. So we sort of get this sense that, there's a certain kind of thing that will happen that's magical, and that will be the person. And some people, they find someone in that magical way and it works out. And that person who's an outlier becomes the model, of what should be possible for all of us. When what I've seen, particularly through Married at First Sight, is people do grow in love. They grow as humans and they grow in love. And the more they are with a person who has the right elements of goodness, then that thing can flower and become just extraordinarily elaborated, because they put the time and the trust and the foundational elements of themselves into it. So I don't think people should settle, but I don't think they should, because settling, you're with the wrong person. That I don't think is a good idea. But if you're with the mostly right person, you can grow that into a really great relationship.
I love it. Dr. Schwartz, so many amazing bits of advice throughout this chat. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And I feel like that was incredibly helpful. If anybody wants more information on Dr. Schwartz, I know Jeff Graham has it because I don't.
Yeah, and I want to make sure, Dr. Schwartz, we're plugging 2 books from you. Of course, you've written 25, but Snap Strategies for Couples is really valuable right now because it offers a ton of practical takeaways for couples. And then your other book, The Normal Bar, I think those would be the most valuable 2 right now, but she has 23 other books, so if you don't want those, you can check them out on Amazon. And of course...
you have to read them all.
Yeah, and Dr. Schwartz, your website is www.pepperschwartz.com. So
we'll put that link in the summary so you guys can just click easily on there. Dr. Schwartz, thanks so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate it.
I think it was fun talking to you.
All right. Have a great one.
All right.
Wow. Lots of good tips, guys.
She is, 75 years of experience will do that. It's
crazy.
She got her PhD in 75 and has managed, I find it very inspiring because she's managed to stay so relevant and on top of topical issues for 5 decades.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
She's the Madonna of love and psychology and
maybe the Cher. Do we dare say the Cher? The Cher, yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us as always. In the meantime,
balls.
be nice people, make good choices, and be present.